Welcome in, everybody. I am Dan Wiederer, happy to be joined by my colleague, Brad Biggs of the Chicago Tribune. We have a action-packed conversation for you today. On Tuesday, we heard from Bears general manager Ryan Pace, coach Matt Nagy, as we try to get a little bit clearer picture on where the Bears are at in their offseason progress. Obviously, Brad, everyone is most interested in the quarterback conundrum, right? And the riddle that has sort of vexed this franchise for 101 seasons. As we go into season number 102, Ryan Pace said it yesterday, right now on March 3rd, 2021, everything is on the table for the Bears. Let's start there. Your reaction to that sentiment on Tuesday.
Well, I don't believe everything's on the table. I think there are a lot of options on the table. I think they're considering a plethora of moves to try to address the position. Is literally everything out there? No, I don't believe that. But surely they've got to have many different avenues that they're exploring and that they're comfortable heading down, because there really isn't, short of them landing a Hail Mary here, I don't know that a perfect quarterback is out there for them.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you were sort of interested in gathering during those Zoom conferences yesterday, and I give you credit for taking a stab at this with Matt Nagy, is with all the options that the Bears have laid out for them, whether it's plan A, plan B, plan C, plan XYZ at the end, how many of those plans would Matt and Ryan feel good about if they had to go to opening day with that plan being what their option is? And Matt didn't give you a very straightforward answer. He said several. We don't know whether several means 3. We don't know whether it means 9 or 10. But obviously, I think it's a well-intentioned and important question to ask, because they don't have the final say in who their quarterback is. There's a lot of moving parts to this. And so you have to try to figure out, when this is all said and done, if the option that they wind up with is one of the several that Matt said yesterday he would feel good about.
Yeah, does he have as many options that he feels confident in as the number of coordinator candidates he interviewed to replace Chuck Pagano? Because that number was 9. And I can't imagine there's 9 quarterbacks out there that the Bears would feel good about being able to go out and get and sort of lift up this stagnant offense, the one that Matt acknowledged needs to score more points, score more touchdowns. That's been a bugaboo for them for quite a while now, and they've got to come up with a solution as they prepare for this season.
As we sit here 2 weeks before free agency and less than 2 months before the draft, I think we're both in agreement that look, everything on the table means that they may take multiple swings at this. They may go out and make a trade. They may go out and sign a veteran free agency. They may do those things and still draft a quarterback on day 1 or day 2 of the draft in April. And so Bears fans have to be prepared for multiple swings at this and multiple attempts to solve this again. Again, Ryan Pace did that in 2017, signed Mike Glennon in free agency, and then traded up to take Mitch Trubisky in the draft. Who knows how the cards will fall when this is all said and done? Obviously, an option they'd feel good about, and we have to address it just because it's out there, is Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson wants no part of being in Houston anymore with the Texans. He wants to be traded. The Texans haven't yet formally begun taking trade offers on Deshaun Watson. But if the Bears can get in that mix, which you and I are both skeptical that they'd have enough in their arsenal to sit in that auction hall and be able to participate for very long, they have to see that through for as long as they're allowed to stay in the game, right?
Yeah, you absolutely. I mean, you're talking about the opportunity to somehow pay an exorbitant price to get a guy who'd come in and be a top 5 quarterback. That's a no-brainer. When the Texans might start considering offers, I don't know. That's a timeline that Houston controls. The Bears can't go to Houston with some demands of saying, hey, by this date, we've got to know, because the Texans have the prize. The Texans have the quarterback. They're going to be in control of that whole thing. Yeah, would you like a decision before the start of free agency, before the start of the draft? Sure. I don't know how feasible that is, but he's the Hail Mary that's out there, because I don't see the Seattle Seahawks trading Russell Wilson, not in this offseason. You're talking about a $39 million cap hit that Seattle would have to take this season if they traded Wilson now. I mean, that's just taking the detonator and blowing up your 2021 season. I mean, you would cripple yourself. You talk about $180 million cap for this year or something right in that neighborhood, and taking a $39 million hit on one guy that's not there and not having a quarterback to replace him. That just doesn't make sense for the Seahawks. So I think Watson is maybe the Hail Mary that potentially could be out there. What the Bears' chances are, how much competition there would be for his services, I don't know. And then where does Watson want to go? That's a huge factor in the whole thing because he has the no trade clause in that contract.
So our skepticism all along is that because the Bears don't pick in the top, they pick 20th in the first round of April's draft, they don't have a pick in the top 19. It's going to be hard to put together a trade package that is intriguing to the Texans, or certainly comes in as the highest bidder among, again, an auction hall that's going to have a lot of people in that front row raising cards saying, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. And so our skepticism there is that the Bears ultimately won't be able to put together the strongest bid to stay in that conversation. For me, it's identical. If Russell Wilson was up for trade, it would be the same situation. The Bears don't necessarily have enough to stay in that game. But I'm curious, when the word surfaced last week, where Russell Wilson put it out through his agent and through ESPN that he hasn't requested a trade, but if he did, here are 4 cities and teams that he'd be interested in playing for. What was your reaction when the Bears were on Russell's list, and what you made of what he could possibly see in Chicago that maybe some of us don't?
Yeah, I mean, what's super appealing about going to a situation where you've got a GM and a head coach that are going into the season on the hot seat? I'll go to a place and I don't know what's going to happen in the future. There's a good defense in place. The pieces on offense are certainly not as good as Seattle has right now. When you talk about skill position, I don't know if you want to criticize the Seahawks offensive line. Okay, where does the Bears offensive line stack up against it? The Bears offensive line performed better late in the season. I don't think there's any question about that. You have to look a little bit at some of the teams they were going against. And you have to hope that they can sort of pick up some of the momentum that they did build late in the 2020 season, moving into 2021. But a little bit surprising. But again, I just don't find it realistic because it simply doesn't make sense for Pete Carroll, the oldest coach in the NFL, to say, we had a heck of a run with Russell. We won a ton of regular season games. We went to 2 Super Bowls. We won one of them. And we're going to start over from scratch. I mean, just where does that make sense for the Seahawks? It doesn't.
Peter King had a nugget in his notes coming out of the weekend that Russell Wilson is close with Jimmy Graham from their time together in Seattle, and that Jimmy spoke very highly of the Bears. And my question to that, Brad, my curiosity was, if we could get Jimmy, is what makes Jimmy an expert on what the Bears are? Jimmy has been here for less than a year. Jimmy was part of an 8-8 season that included a lopsided playoff loss. Jimmy was here during a year where the team wasn't together during the offseason OTAs and mini camps. He was here during a season when the facility closed down for long chunks during the pandemic because guys would test positive or there'd be contact tracing. I'm just curious, Jimmy played all 8 of his home games with the Bears in front of an empty stadium. So I'm curious what it was about his experience in the first year in Chicago that led him to say, you absolutely have to be here. This brand of 8-8 is someplace that you've got to join, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a great question because Jimmy's speaking about a year which was bizarre by any.
And included a 6-game losing streak, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it just doesn't seem realistic to me that Wilson pops loose in a trade that's going to come at a huge cost. Now, if you could get the Wilson contract, it's they've paid out the bonus money. It could slide right in and be a nice fit for the Bears, but that's another reason why the price tag that the Seahawks would put on him in any type of trade discussions is just going to be astronomical and through the roof.
And so I'm going to spin you to the other side of the spectrum. While the pie in the sky dreamers can think about Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson in a Bears jersey, as Photoshop has shown on social media that people have thought about, Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles have uncertain futures themselves. Trubisky's contract with the Bears will expire in 2 weeks. I think you and I would both be stunned, probably beyond stunned, if he was back with the team in 2021. Certainly we would be shocked, stunned, astonished, and whatever other synonym you want to attach to it, if he was propped up by this regime as having the chance to start again to open the 2021 season. Foles, meanwhile, is under contract, right? And so the Bears have to consider that a little bit more seriously. And Matt Nagy was asked about his evaluation of Nick Foles in 2020 on Tuesday and kind of steered around it, said that in their scheme evaluations, they're seeing that some of the pieces weren't necessarily there in place for Nick to succeed with some of the turnover and reshuffling that they had to do on the offensive line during the period of the season that he was starting. But do you see any scenario in which Nick Foles is A, still around with the Bears when they practice for the first time together in 2021, and B, positioned to maybe be your week 1 starter?
Well, he's going to be around unless they find a taker for him, and the contract's got $12 million guaranteed still in it. So unless there's a team that's willing to flip the Bears a late round draft pick to bring Foles in to be their backup, he's going to be employed by the Bears, and the chance of them being able to trade him, I don't think that's real great. Is there a team that's going to want to basically pay him about $8 million a year to be a backup? I don't know. He didn't play well last season. He didn't play well in 2019 when he was in Jacksonville. So, yeah, I think he's with the Bears. Is he an option for them as a week 1 starter? Because he's the only quarterback that they have under contract, yeah, you've got to put him in that category. But, man, I think that's way down their list of, rankings of, hey, how are we going to attack this? How are we going to get better? I don't know how you sell it as improvement with Nick Foles. They would try to say, hey, well, we upgraded here. We realized we could have done some different things scheme-wise, coaching-wise, play-calling-wise, maybe to help Nick out. But, man, it was awful. It was awful when he was out there. And the offensive line did not play well, and they had a bunch of injuries, and they went against some of the better defenses that they faced during the course of the entire season in that stretch when he was the starter. But, boy, you look back on that and you say, no bueno. So I just, man.
You're not putting that in the several category. I think
it's in the several category, but boy, it's got to be bringing up the caboose, right?
There's no question about it. And I assume you're in agreement with me that Mitch Trubisky's time in Chicago will come to an end the middle of this month, and it will be an unceremonious end to a 4-year tenure that had so much promise and potential and significance attached, and ultimately goes down as a failure.
And not only do I believe that the Bears aren't interested in a reunion with Mitch Trubisky, I question whether Mitch is interested in a reunion with the Chicago Bears. And it's a two-way street because he's coming out of contract. So he's in a situation where a fresh start elsewhere is probably going to be something that he believes will most benefit his career. And they've been down that road before of, we're going to try to improve around him and make the stuff around him better, accentuate his strengths, call plays to what he does well. They've done all that, and they've gone 16-17 the last 2 years. Now, his record is better than that because they struggled, as I said, so mightily when Nick Foles played. But, boy, I think that ship has left the port, and I don't think it's returning to the dock at House Hall.
If you're Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy and your bosses have given you this gift, this extra lease on life and the ability to correct your mistakes and go into 2021 with the belief that you can get things turned around, it would be suicidal, in my opinion, to say, let's try to reboot Mitch one more time. Let's try this one more time. I mean, we know well enough to know that Nagy was frustrated early on in 2019. You can't imagine a scenario where then you're dealing with the roller coaster ride in September and October of 2021 and trying to make the most out of a situation that has led you nowhere to this point.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even asked about Mitch if I had the opportunity yesterday, because I just, when Pace and Nagy spoke, because I just don't believe that's in the cards for the Bears.
So my last question for you is a month and a half ago or right around Super Bowl week, Matt Nagy told Mike Silver on NFL.com that he felt that the Bears were really close. I believe those were his words, really close to contending for championships if they can get the quarterback position right. That sentiment isn't widely shared around the league. The Bears are sort of thought to be this sort of wayward, middle of the road team that's in a danger zone of believing they're closer than they actually are. I'm curious what you make of A, Matt's contention that they're really close, and B, the fact that Matt and Ryan on Tuesday both held this up as a quote unquote playoff ready team and celebrated the achievement that they've been in the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years.
Well, getting to the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years is an accomplishment, and that's something that absolutely they're going to point to, and they're going to point to a defense that they believe is high caliber, that they believe will be improved with Sean Desai taking over this season, a defense that's got massive investments at all 3 levels of it. And they've got some young skill position players that they believe are ascending. I think David Montgomery, Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney probably all fit nicely in that category. So I can understand how they feel like they've got an opportunity here. Listen, they kicked in the window to announce that they were ready to compete for a title right before the start of the 2018 season when they made the trade for Khalil Mack. They're not ready to give up on that endeavor yet. They're not going to throw in the towel on chasing a championship with a defense that they believe can regain that form. You know, the defense played really well during the first half of this past season. So if they can get the mojo back on that side of the ball, if they can become more explosive on offense, and as Matt said, score some more points.
Yeah.
So I don't know that their chances are great of pulling this off, but I think if you were in their position, you'd be saying the exact same thing. You would be clinging to the same ideas and hope, and you got to give them a chance to see this thing through now that they've been brought back by George McCaskey.
My hope is that in their candid conversations behind closed doors at Hallis Hall, that they acknowledge what 2021 was, and it was not a promising season. It was an 8-8 year. It was basically a replay of 2019 with offensive identity crisis for a lengthy stretch of the season. It included a 6-game losing streak. It required them to back into the playoffs after losing their finale at home to the Packers. I think you and I know Matt well enough to say that type of failure has to bother him more than he would let on publicly in his optimistic ways. I just hope that when he and Ryan get together, that they acknowledge that, look, we can tell the public that we've made the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years, but we have to acknowledge that the way we got into the playoffs in 2021 is not playoff ready. Brad, when I think playoff ready, I think of a team that's ready to win in the postseason, a team that's ready to play 2 or 3 weeks deep into January, possibly believe they can get to February. This team hasn't been that in either of the last 2 seasons. 500, lopsided playoff loss to the Saints. And so I hope that they sort of share that honest view of this team, even as they sort of try to sell to the public, hey, we've got enough pieces here to be good enough to be in that postseason bracket.
Well, I think their actions are going to tell us truly how they feel. You know, we can speculate and wonder what they're thinking and wonder what their, you know, heart-to-heart, honest evaluation behind closed doors is going to be, which they're not going to share with us as much as we'd care for them to do so. Let's see what lies ahead for them when free agency kicks off on March 17th. Let's see how active they are. Let's see which positions they choose to address. Let's see how the plan that unfolds from the middle of this month into the middle of April then affects how they approach the draft in late April. Because they could say whatever they want. It's the moves they make. It's their actions that are going to speak a ton louder than these Zoom press conferences, which are, you know, I mean, it's Pace going down Vague Street and making a turn onto Murky Avenue. Right. You know, I mean, right. Is your name Ryan Pace? You'll get an answer from him on that. You'll get anything concrete. That was hard to come by. That's sort of been how he's approached these media availabilities that are usually held in Indianapolis at the Combine. I wish, you know, we were there instead of me sitting here with my guy Buzz. But you know, I'm not gonna put too much into what they're saying. What I'm going to put a ton into, though, is what they're doing and the moves that they've got coming here shortly.
No question about it. I think you and I both miss the combine experience in Indianapolis because it's not just those on the record conversations. It's those conversations in the hallways of the convention center, outside the Starbucks, of the JW Marriott, that help you get a little bit more of a pulse on where the Bears are leaning, where other teams are leaning, where everything's going on. Certainly missed that in the NFL calendar this year. Hopefully in 2022, we'll be back there in normal fashion. We'll see how it goes. Brad, thanks for jumping on here. Always enjoy the conversation.
With this guy.
Hello to Buzz.
Yeah.
Really behaved himself, which is a big deal for the show. And so he deserves an extra treat when we get off. To our audience, remember to hit the subscribe button. Stick with us. We're going to have a lot more content for you as we go forward. And certainly we are going to remain on quarterback watch until quarterback watch is over. For Brad Biggs, I'm Dan Wiederer. Thanks for joining us.